Greetings everyone, this is George Wilmer presenting my project development during my year in MFA. Apologies for the way in which this is recorded, I'm currently in lockdown due to COVID. So in terms of content, we're going to be moving chronologically throughout the year for the sake of narrative ease. Looking where I was prior to the course, where I was at each term, as well as where I'm going to be going in the future. So I thought it'd be useful to provide context of where I was channeling my art and creativity prior to the course, which was mostly through prop costume and set design, thanks in part to my previous education in film and television production at Greenwich, which I then continued on as into a freelance career. Like a lot of people during the lockdown, I found myself with a lot of time and I used it essentially to explore my art further and figure out where I was going to go. It was something I hadn't really had the time and money to actively explore my art in a while, at least not since I was much younger. So this new art kind of took the form of a lot of what I was doing professionally, so costuming and things like that, but for recreation rather than as a profession. I also additionally explored my woodwork, and most notably into miniature diorama making during this time. So mostly out of recycled materials when possible for all of this art. You can see from this slide a few of the examples here. I think the idea of the little dioramas was that I wasn't able to go out, so it was kind of bring a little slice of nature to something you could keep in your pocket. The other obvious big outcome of it came that I decided I was going to start my MA, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but just hadn't really had the time to truly sit down and think about it. So, at the start of the course, evidently I chose an MA in arts, which wasn't an easy decision. Eventually it did come down to between a lot of different, a lot of different courses. It came down to either art or design, but I went with fine arts course because I preferred the hands-on and flexible nature of it compared to the more rigid and calculated approach required for a design course. I did come in mostly ignorant of exactly what I wanted to do. I knew mediums I enjoyed, styles I wanted to draw on, some causes I was passionate about, but I also knew little about the actual academic side of what this course would entail. It had been a while since I'd done writing. So I knew it was going to essentially require a lot of research on my part, which we'll get to. Essentially I was starting from scratch, I guess is the point to take away there. The only thing I did know is that I wanted to pursue collage as a medium, that being one I had felt a connection with from a pretty early age. I had come from a fairly working class background where art supplies like canvases and brushes and all of those more pricey mediums were not always within reach, but I always had, a pile of magazines, glue, scissors to create from, so it kind of instilled with me this idea of creating art from not only sustainable materials, something else I'm quite passionate about, but also learning to remix images and reuse and appropriate the established imagery of our present day into something new. So part of the research, as mentioned, involved there was a big deep dive into new and old artists who thematically spoke to me and reflect similar sentiments I wanted to achieve. You can see a few of the names on screen here, but a lot of them often came from things like the Situationist movement, Dadaism, abstract and surreal, artworks. Things like Dali, Hannah Hocht, Basquiat, Kirby, especially when it came to collage. Once I had kind of established like a good group of names and movements, I was able to narrow my research into things like interviews, articles, going to exhibitions, seeing archives of old work, all those types of things. It allowed me to kind of create a wider picture and a better understanding of what I wanted from my own work. Lastly, the last bit of relevant research to discuss here was gathering materials. Since as I said, I kind of started out not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do, I essentially had to start from scratch. So over a course of a few months, all the way up until the current day, I've been collecting magazines, cutting, sorting them, essentially making use of anything I can get my hands on for my work. So part of this research was also setting up the studio. Once I had an idea of what I wanted to do, I was able to really go at it and create a place of my own, which you can see here. I think a lot of the ethos came from this kind of maximalist aesthetic, came from not really having the luxury of that space before, so me really overindulging in it. It wasn't conscious, but I did kind of establish almost this anti-white wall philosophy. You know, more of a salon style than the modern gallery white cube style of like letting a single piece breathe. You know, I wanted people to be overwhelmed by my space, but you know, in the good way. And I drew upon a lot of things like my woodworking, carpentry skills, to build things like custom shelving, you know, just stuff to make my space my own, as well as like frames to have my work. And you know, it was an organic growth kind of process. You know, when I needed a bigger desk, I'd get a bigger desk. When I needed more walls for displaying, I did that. It was I let the space grow organically rather than having a set space in my mind, which is pretty reflective of my actual work. So term one, for ease, I'm going to break them down to terms. During this span of work, it was mostly concerned with the abstract and surreal imagery, making use of you know, cosmic horror and retrofuturist imagery, mostly on small canvas, which was no reflection that I wasn't quite as competent in my work, nor had the resources to openly experiment without you know, using up a lot of them all at once. I kind of created these cosmic landscapes, and often found myself using a motif of geometric shapes, which to me, I guess, rang of this kind of unearthly eeriness, you know, something that couldn't exist in the natural world. So it felt like an appropriate metaphor for things like intrusive thought. Yeah, a lot of this abstract surrealist stuff was kind of an outward expression of feelings of existentialism, disassociation, drifting anxiety, you know, all of those bad things. And to continue on that, the motif of like the spacesuit often reoccurring in a lot of my early work, I think, was also a reflection on these feelings. You know, it's a protective shell that shields you from the world around you, but also cuts it off. And I'm sure after 2 years of lockdown and staying indoors and isolated from people, you can kind of see how that imagery would kind of be pervasive and prevalent in my work. Also on the space suit topic, one thing I wanted to look into was that retrofuturism, you know, a movement where the visuals explore the idea of the future through the lens of the past. So it's, you know, examines the tensions through that modern lens, and it's all about contrast, nostalgic imagery with current issues, futuristic design stuck in the previous generation, hopeful imagery hiding dystopian realities. In recent years, there's been a renewed interest in space, you know, as we get all of these billionaires trying to be, you know, the space's first conqueror, as one might put it. But these being, you know, ultra-capitalists with histories of labour violations and shady practices, I kind of feel they're the ones least qualified to achieve that utopian vision. So even that's turned to despair, hence my my interest in the themes of retrofuturism. You know, it's that disparity between the hopeful past and grim reality that I find a lot of my work is sitting in. So term two, most notable difference, I was scaling up my work at this point. I was moving away from kind of the cosmic elements, though still trying to channel that, you know, that horror aspect in my work. Part of this, there was also more experimentation, partly due to me having way more resources at my disposal, bigger canvases to work on, and more confidence. That was a big thing. So I channeled those kind of previous themes into more specific issues. You know, this was self-identity, transhumanism, burnout, and as you can see from a lot of the imagery here, I was also trying to kind of draw from a history of the labour movement and a work of arts, you know, the kind of thing where you would see human depicted as machine, you know, things like Metropolis or Modern Times, to name some film examples. I kind of figured that, you know, Marx spoke of the worker in the factory, but in this modern age we're more likely to be in front of a screen and a conveyor belt, so this was my modern update on those kind of old themes. In terms of experimentation, I did it throughout all of the terms, but I would probably break it down to three things. Number one, most of my collage is pretty tactile, so I did experiment with some digital collaging for a while. I did absolutely love and enjoy my time doing it. You know, you got all the materials you could ever want throughout the internet. You can do things like edit colors and switch layers, and you have a lot more flexibility, but I do miss the tactile nature of it, which is why, though I made a dozen or so across the first two terms, I have kind of abandoned it as a regular part of my art process. Second thing I did was attempt to animate a lot of my work, especially through the idea of glitch art. You can see a kind of a three-step stage of the three different ones. Collage is all about remixing, reinterpreting, and I kind of see glitch art as a continuation of those kind of practices. You know, it's all about distortion and it's all about distortion, abstracting the style further, you know. So kind of just feels like something that was worth exploring. Plus, I like the idea that I can improve the experience, or at least build upon it, with things like movement and music, which I often implement in a lot of them. The last experiment to talk about here is the Quick and Dirty collection, which is a ongoing project where I give myself limitations to create my art. So these were made on postcards in 15 minutes or less, with the purpose to teach myself to work more intuitively, you know, with those self-imposed restrictions. This allowed for a really high prolific output of my work, the most sites I've honestly done in years, and it also has resulted in some of my favourite pieces I've made. It's not all of my winners, as you'd expect, but it's really been something I've been really enjoying doing, and felt has like opened me up as an artist. So last thing, what's next? Looking forward to the future, term 3. So I'm going to be continuing my experimentations in animation, as well as the postcard collection, which that one in particular I've considered such a success that I'm actually going to bring it into my summer show, which you can see some other sketches of what I want to do, as well as a few of these postcard bits here. The summer show is honestly going to be one of the things that will be the biggest focus in the third term. I've got a particular interest in curation as a possible career move in the future, as well as possibilities of the frame. So I'm going to use the summer show as well as some independent ones that me and the other MA people are putting on to kind of explore this further, and how it can enhance or build upon the themes of my work, and you know, how layouts and composition can affect an audience's experience. So that's that. As it pertains to the actual artwork itself, I'm going to continue scaling up my work now that I continue to have more materials. I'm going to also lean into some of the common motifs that I'd unconsciously been including in my work, that of body and human feature, segmentation, negative space, abstraction, artificial borders around my work, all of that kind of stuff. I want to see what happens when I actively try and lean into these things I'd been doing subconsciously before. Lastly, as you can see from a few of the images here, I've mostly been working on flat canvas, so I'm kind of interested in exploring moving from solely 2D to some 3D sculpture elements, using my experience in woodwork, sculpture, prop design, set design to kind of build upon that. One example, as seen here, is with a lot of my work talking about distortion of the human face and body. I want to see if I can maybe move some of my work onto things like masks and mannequins, you know, but whatever I can get my hands on. It's yet to be seen how accessible this was. But yeah, thanks for listening to my journey through project development over the last year, and that's it from me.